Today, to celebrate the 50th video in this series, I thought I'd make a video about my own game called Anguish that I've started in the Scorpion engine, which has really revolutionized Amiga game making in the last few years. I highly recommend that you check it out. This game was made for an Amiga Game Jam in 2024 and is still a work in progress. The theme of the Game Jam is the sequel that never was, so we wanted to do a spiritual successor to Agony. So I've been working on it with the great artist Wrath of Khan and musician Wibbly Wall. We put out this free playable demo of level 1 and also the first bonus stage. And level 2 is almost done, and we hope to premiere it on the Amiga Bill show soon, and hope to have the full game out by sometime in 2028. So this is an AGA game in 64 colors, and as you could probably tell from my videos, I love parallax scrolling. So I was really trying to emphasize a lot of parallax. So we've got 3 overlapping layers. Unfortunately, Scorpion Engine doesn't have dual playfield support yet. I'm really looking forward to when that is available. But in the meantime, with AGA, you've got 8 64 pixel wide sprites. So I've tried to put those to great use. If we take off the sprites, boom, everything in the background was all sprites. If we take off the bit planes and then look at the sprites one by one, so sprite 0 is 3 colors in 64 wide for the rock, and that's combined with sprite 1 and sprite 2 and sprite 3. So you'll notice with sprite 3 that it wraps around the screen. That's a feature in Scorpion that allows AGA sprite screen wrap. So to get 2 full background layers of parallax scrolling, you can do 4 64 pixel sprites beside each other. So that's 256 pixels across. And the screen is 288 across, so it just repeats a bit on the other side. You can probably see that better for this next layer. So sprite 4 is the far background. You just change the Z order of the sprites to make it behind the other one. So you can see what I was talking about. You have this sprite, and then it repeats over here. It's probably easier to see if we take off the rocks. So yeah, you'll see this little section is the same as this section right here. So you just have to make a 256 wide background that seamlessly repeats. So if you take the 288 width of the screen, and it would be 256 right here. So this little strip is just 32 pixels across. So then if we add sprite 5 and 6 and 7, it comes all the way over and makes the complete background. I've also put a 24-bit AGA gradient on the moon and a 24-bit AGA gradient on the snow. So with the copper visualizer, you can see it changes the color here and here and here and here. I think that's because 24-bit copper color change takes 4 copper moves, and then the color 0 change here is just representing this 12-bit gradient in the sky, which goes from dark blue down to the pink and purples here. We've also animated the sprite by having these little birds flying in the background. So with the copper block, you can see the difference between the more coarse gradient over here compared to the smoother one here and down here. So if I move it down slowly, you can see it change, and it's much more subtle in the 24-bit changes. So if we put on the sprite visualizer and then play it, you get a good sense of what is sprites, and then put the bit planes back on, and they're all there in the background. I mentioned that the game was in 64 colors, so in 6 bit planes. So here's the palette visualizer, and then the bottom little strip of the HUD is just 16 color 4 bit planes. If we take all those bit planes off, you can see bit plane 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. An interesting thing is that most of the games I show have more colors in the palette visualizer than they do in game. So at this moment, we've got 117 here, but 217 at this point in game. So the reason for that is I put the 24-bit gradients on the sprites because we don't have dual playfield, and usually it's the background in dual playfield that has the 24-bit sky gradient, or even single playfield like in some of the levels of Turrican 2 AGA. This palette visualizer doesn't yet show the sprite palettes, so that's why there's so many more colors when you have the actual game showing. So here it is with the blitter visualizer. You can see that the falcon is blit and that the enemies are blit, and then you can see the scrolling tiles come in on the side. You can see down in the corner how Scorpion Engine locks the frame rate at 50 frames per second. But if I play it frame by frame, you'll see that everything in the foreground moves every frame, but the rocks here, the parallax background, moves every second frame because that's scrolling slower to give the parallax effect. So here's frame, 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 frame. You'll notice that it changes from the rocks in the background here to when I get through this little tunnel with the bones, that we're going to have a new background, and it's the trees right here. So I was kind of proud of that idea. We came up with a transition area. So this mausoleum was put here to disguise the fact that we're switching the sprites in the background. So here it is without the foreground, and watch what happens. Boom, there's a huge abrupt change in the sprites. So having that mausoleum helps mask that. We also did the same thing here, where you go from the trees, and when you go through this mausoleum, you come out the other side, then you've got new sprites, which are arches in the background. Now we did this boss in a way in which I'll probably never do again because it was very, very complicated and convoluted. So this is the Scorpion engine screen, and this is the blocks. So it's the little red thing, the 16 by 16 block. And what I did was make every little section of him a block. So this one and this one and this one and all the way through. And then if you scroll down, you can see how many blocks there are. All those, down here, we're still doing it. So every animation, every transition, all the way down to these last ones here. Wait, there's more down here, all the S ones too. So my one piece of advice is don't make bosses with blocks. There's much easier ways. While we're in Scorpion, I might as well show you all the tabs. So project is where you do with palette, and so you can pick AGA or OCS and the screen size and how big the sprites are, where the sprites are, which fetch mode you have. If you want 24-bit AGA color, then you have the animations tabs. So here's a butterfly, for example, 2 different frames highlighted or not. And then you have the actors tab, which is all your sprites or bobs. And you can pick where the animations come from or how you want him to be controlled. So this one is a pattern. So I drew a pattern that he does over and over. There's the audio tab where you can put in mods and sound effects. And then here's the code section where you can do different code. Now, I'm not a good coder at all, and I often need help, but there's definitely a lot of helpful people at the Pixel Glass Discord for Scorpion Engine. Then there's the fonts tab, which is self-explanatory. Then the maps tab, where you can see your level. You can select your background. Then there's the tile sets, which are the graphics you have. There's some different ones. And then finally is the panels tab, where you can have like your title page or your HUD that you could set up with store and lives, and then your copper skies. So yeah, it's a powerful game engine, and it also does Sega Genesis, Mega Drive, and Neo Geo. And here's the bonus level after the first stage, where you want to pick up the Leers to get an extra point and avoid the Medusas to lose a point and trying to get a continue. For some reason, there's some graphical corruption in the debugger here, but that's not normal. So yeah, just try to ignore if you can the little graphical glitches here. And if you want to see the power of AGA sprites, take the sprites off, black screen. That was everything except the falcon. So sprite 0 is one of the pillars. Sprite 1 is the same pillar, but with a different Z order. Sprite 2, different pillar. Sprite 3, the same, different Z order. Sprite 4, the third pillar. And sprite 5. And then sprite 6 and 7 are the far background. So here's just the background, and it has different slices. So these all move at different speeds, the different slice. And then the animation here. So yeah, with the pillars back and it paused, you can kind of see the different Z orders. So the depth, so one is on top of the other. And then when it plays, it looks like that. So with the sprite visualizer, we get this. So yeah, the only thing being blipped is your player, the liars, and the Medusas. This level is also in 64 colors, 6-bit planes, and with the copper visualizer, you can see that it's the background sprites 6 and 7 that are controlled everywhere. It's not the copper doing the pillars, so I can take those off. So you can see it changes sprite 6 and sprite 7, where the graphics change here, and where they change here and here, where you do the different scroll. And since these sprites are repeated and multiplexed across the screen, it keeps changing them here, 6 position, 7 position, 6 position, 7 position, and so on. So you can see that the copper is getting a real workout here. I actually started my Scorpion journey a few years ago, or should I say me and my 11-year-old daughter at the time. She was really into art, so I thought it would be fun to make a game together. I'd never coded a day in my life before, besides a few lessons in BASIC in high school, and it took a while, but the difficulty curve in Scorpion wasn't too crazy. The only thing my daughter didn't like is the low resolutions and low color count. So she drew this title page, but on her tablet in a high resolution and with lots of colors. And then I just converted it to 256 colors and a smaller resolution. So you can see the 256 colors there. So my daughter drew pretty much everything you see on screen here. Here it is moving, but it was me that insisted on parallax. It was also AGA 64 colors. That's kind of the sweet spot for speed. If I take all the bit planes off, you can see all the sprites and the copper sky. Here's sprite 1, the sailboat. Sprite 2, a smaller sailboat that wraps around. Sprite 3, and then the clouds are sprite 4, sprite 5, sprite 6, and sprite 7. And just like Anguish, they repeat in the last 32 pixels. This is the CN Tower because it's set in Toronto, where I live. The thing I was most proud about here was this, where I made the moon have extra colors. So if you take the sprites away, you can see the trick. I just made the different copper lines here and then made a transparent circle. And so you can see through to the copper. And so you get an extra 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 colors, whereas the sprites are only 3 colors. And your main character has the power to throw umbrellas. I was feeling patriotic, so I threw in a Canada flag and another Canada flag with the CN Tower because a game has never been set in Canada before, an Amiga game, I don't think. So I wanted to change that. With the glitter visualizer, you can see the player was being blit, and here's the power up. And when you do this, you can shoot lots and lots of umbrellas. So look at all the blits there. I was very excited when I first made these windows that you could see through. And the big end of level ghost boss that she drew, I thought was really cool. Alas, by the time we started on level 2, she kind of lost interest, sadly. So I had to do a bunch of the art here, either myself or find it other places. So the grand idea was to try to have 6 layers of overlapping parallax, but it was kind of a failed experiment, as you can mainly see from how the background looks. My daughter did draw these cool electrical orbs. The inspiration for the parallax was this modern game called Return. I even borrowed the colors from the background, but you'll notice that this one scrolls very smoothly. Compare that to the jerkiness of the scrolling here, and it was a bit of a disappointment, but what can you do? I hope one day I might be able to realize my dream once Scorpion Engine gets dual playfield, because then you could have 2 layers of overlapping parallax with the sprites, and then 2 layers with dual playfield, so 4 layers. So not 6, but close-ish. Although if I knew assembly, I think you could do 6 layers or even more, because you could set up the screen like Agony. Agony uses 6-bit plane dual playfield, but it breaks 3-bit planes into the front layer of parallax, and then 2-bit planes into the middle layer, and then 1-bit plane into the back layer. So with AGA, you could theoretically break it into 8 individual bit planes, and then you could do 2 sprite layers for 10 overlapping layers. The problem there is that most of the layers would either be 1, 2, or 3 colors. More realistically, with AGA, you could do something like dual playfield with 4 bit planes for the front, so 16 colors for the front, and then break up the back bit planes, maybe have 2 bit planes for the middle layer, which could be hardware scrolled, so those are your dual playfield ones. So with the blitter, you could isolate 1 bit plane and scroll it with 2 colors, and then another individual bit plane, and maybe keep that one static with 2 colors. So then you'd have 1 16 color layer, and then 1 4 color layer, and then 2 2 color layers. And then you could also do 1 16 color sprite layer or 2 3 color sprite layers. So instead of that theoretical 10 layer one, which would be kind of hard to make a game around, you could realistically do 5 or 6 layers and have it look good, I think. What I tried to do here is I took 4 64 pixel wide sprites and put them across the screen. And when they scroll, it looks like this. So for those 4 sprites, I just animated them in a pixel program to have a parallax animation, and then just played it here. And then with the other 4 sprites, sprite 4, 5, 6, and 7, I put these 2 layers in a pixel program again and animated them. So they look like this when they scroll, just the sprites. And with all of them together, you get this, just the sprites. So it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different layers and then 6 when you put the bit planes on. But the reason that it's not smooth is because there just isn't enough memory with 2 megabytes on the Amiga to do that many animation frames. So the animations were 256 across and almost 220 pixels high. So I can't quite remember, but I think it was 28 or 30 frames that I could fit in. And that's just not enough frames to make it look smooth. So that's why it looks jerky. But it was really sort of a proof of concept for the future. So if anyone with assembly skills wants to collaborate on ideas for a game that goes from 5 to 10 overlapping layers of parallax, that would be my ultimate dream. I can never get enough parallax in my life. So until that day, I can dream, at least. And my daughter made the graphics for this cute little guy too. And also this 256 color game over screen. So those will definitely remain great memories. So thanks for indulging me in this 50th video, and look out for Anguish in the future. If you want to download the first level playable demo of Anguish, or the bonus level, or even Silhouette Threat level 1 or 2, I'll put the links in the description. They're all free. Thanks so much for watching. Always appreciate it. Please like and subscribe and comment if you haven't yet. Have an amazing day. Take care.